All right, thank you everyone, and thank you for staying so late today, right? We're keeping you from cocktails, so we appreciate you being here with us. Today we want to talk to you about scaling efficiently with unit economics. But first, we have a little bit of trivia we want to do. We do just want to start with, who here has used Reddit? Show of hands? All right, if you haven't, look around and ask yourself why. All right, the first trivia fact, daily active users on Reddit at the end of 2024. Anyone have a guess? All right, very nice.
All right. Who knows our CEO's Reddit username? It's E. Excellent, yes. Will is Will Wheaton. Governor Schwarzenegger is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And here comes the king. Anybody? Snoop.
Snoop Dogg, who was actually an early investor in Reddit. Fun fact. Bonus fun fact, actually. All right, and which games creator inspired an award at our biannual hackathon called Snooze Week? Any guesses? This one's tricky. It's actually Wordle. Josh Wardle worked at Reddit right before creating the game, and that's what he left to explore. He actually helped create our hackathon, though, so we created an award for the engineer who best embodies that spirit. All right, and now...
Who are we? Wait, and more importantly, who's that guy? Yeah, this guy. Anybody know the name of our mascot?
Snoo.
Snoo, that's right. And now the unmasking. Hello, my name is Erin Odmiller, and I am Reddit's efficiency TPM at your service. Yes, there is exactly one of me for all of Reddit. I have had a fairly straightforward path towards FinOps. I come from the engineering side of the house. I graduated with a degree in computer science. I did many, many jobs in the engineering side of the world. I eventually moved into leadership. I was a manager at Amazon. I was a director at Lookout. And then I said, ooh, let's hop off this ladder because being responsible for people, like for people, is really stressful to me. And I became a consultant for a small Postgres consultancy called PGX, PostgreSQL Experts, where I slung low-level Java on Android and was a technical leader. But consultant jobs invariably come up dry, and so I was looking for a new gig, and I ended up at this social media company called Facebook, working in their IT department at the time, which eventually is now called their enterprise engineering department. And that was cool, but the neat thing about being in a giant FANG company is you can move around. So after a few years in EE, I decided to join Facebook, the app, go work on the Big Daddy app to be their efficiency TPM. Again, the one and the only. So if you think Reddit's bad, Facebook was 4,000 people and just me. And that did feel a lot like a salmon swimming upstream. But my partners in Instagram one day said, you know all that work you've done with GPUs, would you come play with us? And I said, you know, that sounds like fun. So then I went and did it again for Instagram. And a little over a year ago, Instagram decided they didn't need TPMs anymore, and many of us left, myself among, and I had a nice summer off, and then last October, I started at Reddit.
All right, thanks, Erin. And I'm Chase Sturgill. I'm a technology FP&A manager at Reddit. I've been all over the FinOps space, which is an amazing thing about this area, right? A lot of different verticals and a lot of learnings you can take from one to the other. So I started my career at one of the first cloud cost management platforms, RightScale, which was then later acquired by Flexera, helping companies implement the tool and also just establish FinOps practices. Decided to go over and try being a practitioner at a software company called Avanti. Thought I liked working with customers a little bit more, so bounced over to consulting with a managed cloud service provider, Mission Cloud Services, again, working with companies, helping them implement FinOps, do optimization practices, and then went over and joined McKinsey, working with some of the largest companies in the world to stand up FinOps practices. About a year and a half ago, decided I wanted to go back to practitioner, try my hand at it again internally, and that's when I joined Reddit. So Erin, engineering, finance, why are we on a stage talking together?
Jason and I talk almost every day. minus weekends when I go outside and touch grass.
I touch the beach, okay? That's better.
Okay, fine, beach, grass, same. So in all seriousness, this is an out of the book like diagram, but we live this every day. Reddit doesn't per se have a FinOps team. We have a V team, Tiger team, whatever you'd like to call it, because I report into the tech PMO. I'm a TPM, he's an FP&A manager, and the other two members of the team, that's right, half of the Reddit FinOps team is standing on this stage. The other half stayed home this time. We're not huge, and we don't all report to the same people, unless, well, I think technically eventually both of us end up reporting up through the COO, but it goes a long ways before it gets to her. But, we're working together on all of this, and of course, we're here to talk to you about that thing in the middle. And so that is really why we're on stage together today.
Yeah, and that's really a key part of our job, right? Unit economics allows us to easily tell the story of what's engineering doing and relate that to the business value. So that's a lot of the language we speak day to day and how I communicate what she's doing and the engineers to my bosses, and then vice versa. She can go tell engineering how their awesome work is contributing to the business. All right, so we just want to set some groundwork here before we actually go into our journey. But let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we say unit economics at Reddit. So just a top level definition, right? Unit economics, this is from the FinOps Foundation, and we're aligned on this one, right? It's about maximizing the business value of cloud initiatives. So if we go below a level, we have unit costs that help to showcase that business value. The FinOps Foundation definition is the incremental cost of cloud services required to deliver the next unit of production. We differ slightly in the way that we think about it. So unit cost that is relevant to a specific part of the business, or in other words, a tool that engineers can use when deciding which path to take, right? If we have a new product we want to launch, it costs X to go do 10% improvement. The other one costs X or half of X to do a 20% improvement. We want to show them that, give them those choices to go make themselves. Overall, for Reddit, what this really means is that our revenue per user should be growing at a faster rate than our cost per user, right? And that delta in those cost curves allows us to go and build more cool shit. That's what we like to do. But notice we don't say reduce the cost per user. We're a growth company, right? We're still in our growing phase. We want to continue to grow our costs, launch really cool features for our users to use that comes with the cost of the business. But we just want to make sure we're doing that in a very efficient way to create profitability for the company. All right, with that said, there's several different ways to think about unit cost and several different things that you all should consider when you're doing unit costs at your own company. The first one, let's think about the types of the actual cost, right? So we have on-demand cost that can help indicate the true growth of a business unit. Usage could be another way to look at it. I'm in finance though. Numbers without a dollar sign in front scare me a little bit. So I stick with on-demand cost. But this is important because say you go purchase a lot of savings plans in AWS, right? That reduces your overall cost. Your usage didn't change. Actually, you just bought that usage for 1 to 3 years. So that would not show appropriately in your discounted costs and give maybe improper credit, right, to reducing that underlying usage. Or if you change your contract, again, savings increase, usage stays the same. So it's important to consider that part of the unit cost. The other piece of it though, discounted costs, I mean, this is really where the ROI is. This is what we report out to Wall Street, what people see about the business. This is the true value. So this is also important. And really, this helps us to talk to engineers, right? Make sure we're all speaking the same language. Finance keeps track of unit cost. We might use that in conversations, but really, we're all talking about discounted cost. The other piece of this is the actual metric or unit of measurement. So when you think about this, it really needs to tie directly to a KPI that business unit impacts, right? What's the work that they're doing actually doing for the business? So we'll go into some examples later, but one for us, right? We have an ads organization. One of their key things is impressions. That makes a lot of sense, right? You have impressions for ads. Picking something completely different, like a user, ads doesn't necessarily draw more users to the business. That wouldn't make sense, right? So weigh those things when you're thinking about unit of measurement. Something else to consider is normalizing units across your business units to create similar values. So if you're talking to business unit A and their metric's 1 penny per whatever that metric is, business unit B is $10 per whatever their metric is, well, you just created a really weird dynamic, right, when you're talking across these things. Also, if someone's seeing a penny per cost, they're way more likely not to care. So think about how you normalize that in order to have relevant conversations with your business partners. Another fun conversation when you're talking about cost is length of time. That can vary a lot, right? So we think about our unit cost in a couple different ways: annually, monthly, daily. Depending on what you're trying to showcase, right, that might influence what you want to show. For us, we're a pretty seasonal business. That's how ads work. So like if we're comparing one quarter to another, that's not necessarily relevant. So that might influence what we're showing and do year over year instead. So think about what you're comparing there. And for that purpose as well, consider rolling averages. When I say one day here, again, we're seasonal throughout the week. People touch grass on the weekend, believe it or not. So they use Reddit a little bit less. So comparing a Saturday to a Monday cost figure doesn't make a lot of sense. So we might show average Monday cost and compare that for cost anomalies. Or do a weekly cost average or 28 days, right? Because months are not all created the same.
Let's not talk about February. And that we have had panics over February.
Always a problem. All right, so putting all that together, no, it was a mouthful, but this is an example of what that might look like. So again, alluded to our ads organization. This is something that we track with them. It's their average daily spend per 1 million impressions. So what did we do there, right? We took that monthly cost, divided it down to average daily costs, so removing the number of days in the month. We take our impressions, we divide it by 1 million to create a number that makes sense to the business and it's comparable to other business units when we talk along these terms. And then we also track this on both the on-demand and discounted basis every month.
And just a final note on that, ads started out as per 1,000 impressions, and that's when we had a penny problem that Chase alluded to earlier, where it was like sub-pennies per 1,000 impressions, and it just made no sense. And no one really understood, because when you talk about fractional pennies, millions, now we're not talking about fractional pennies anymore, right? We're talking about actual money, and people can put a number on it. So this is part of why it's actually important. It's conversationally and mentally important to the people you're working with. But this is my playbook. This is my baby, so I'm here to tell you about it. Shockingly, it has 3 steps. I know, you're like, wow, just 3 steps. So first, as with all things, when you're building something new, you need to discover it. What are you going to build? And specifically, what is going to move the needle in your part of the business? Chase mentioned this earlier. This is where I actually diverge, because I'm the one who wrote the definition that Chase had on that slide. What moves the needle for your part of the business because you are incentivized in your business unit to do a specific thing? It might be get ads impressions because that makes money for the company. It might be make better recommendations to users so that they engage with more of the content in the feed. Neither of those inherently very easily tie up to CPU utilization or CPU allocation. Engaging with the feed does tie to daily active users, but ads impressions doesn't really. You can see how some of these top-down things don't fit, right? But if I ask you what moves it for you, you can tell me. And then we can work with that. So then we say, okay, you want to talk about ads impressions. And we know what actually, and ads is a great case because ads is a monetization arm of the company, so of course ads wants to talk about money. They were our first test case and they have been wonderful partners. They know how much money they make off an ad impression. We've known that for a while. What does it cost? And to them, the incentive there was now they can actually talk about an ROI. Not everyone's gonna get that, right? But for them, that was a huge incentive to move them towards this, through this process. But so we start with a bunch of approximations because you're trying to talk about what it takes to serve an ad to a customer, which is an entire flow through a bunch of microservices, some of them shared, some of them multi-tenant. Get to the end, storage, transport, testing environments. Is this metric actually representative of the flow? How representative can we make it? Also, I would rather have a bad approximation than no metric. Let's be clear. And then, now we have it, we've refined it, we've gone through feedback loops, and we've worked with the SMEs in ads. So I work with the team outside of ads to do that initial heavy lift of building them an initial metric. And then we get them involved. How could we make it better for you? Because we want them to next use the metric. I build you a tool and it sits on the bench. It is not doing any good, and we wasted the company's money, and I'm the efficiency TPM, bad efficiency TPM. So, the easy way is what Chase mentioned, we're an experiment review. Both of these things lift by 10%. One's more expensive. Which do we choose? Right? There you go.
All right, so we just want to kind of lay some groundwork here on what we've learned throughout our journey before actually going and sharing that journey with you.
But also, I stand on the shoulders of giants. I joined in October last year. It's like month 8. Chase is going to talk about the stuff that came before me, that he and the rest of the team built.
This was the easy part. She's too nice. All right, so when we first started looking at this issue, we came at it a top-down approach, right, to building unit metrics for Reddit. So the first part of this journey was defining key business areas to develop these unit metrics for. Your businesses are probably also pretty complicated. This can be a large challenge to take on if you want to go tackle 30 business units at the start, right? Probably don't want to do that. We didn't want to do that. So we defined high level in the business 5 areas that make up, it was over 90% of our cloud spend. So they're very high level areas though, right? They could get complex underneath, but let's start somewhere with what we had. So we had 5. Next, we want to investigate and develop a list of potential unit metrics. We approach this very open-minded, right? You might go into this thinking one thing's gonna be correct and leave out a whole lot of good candidates that you didn't appropriately consider. So working with each of those business units, we interviewed a lot of people to develop large lists of potential unit economic candidates. For each business domain, we had roughly 10 to 15 different metrics that we wanted to use to compare the cost against to see what was truly a best fit. So once we had that list, we actually ran regression analyses on that to determine what was truly a best fit backed by math. Yay. So we did this over several different periods as well, right? What worked last year might not be the same. Businesses change, business units change, different metrics might be needed over time. So we analyzed 2 years, 1 year, past 6 months, past quarter, made sure that what was the best fit was similar across all those periods. And if it didn't work for all those periods, what was the most recent best fit? And for each of those 5 business units, we were able to come up with a metric where the R-squared value was over 0.95. So that's a pretty good fit, especially when we start to think about using that for forecasting, right? You want that to be really high. But once we got that, you had to put it to the test. So for finance, that was actually using that in forecasting. So we changed our whole forecasting process to be unit-driven with these new metrics that we just discovered and started planning our forecast with that. And we did this early last year, and it worked pretty well for the whole year, until it didn't.
Until it didn't. So I want to be clear. Top down, like the book says, unit metrics are not bad, but they might not get you all of the way there. And thus, in comes a TPM. Actually, they hired me because they had problems like this. This is literally why I'm here. Who goes, well, what is the gap? And it turns out the gap is cultural. JR said this earlier. You've heard this a bunch of times. I've heard this in pretty much every talk I've been to today. The gap is cultural. Because the beautiful metric Chase defined, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, doesn't correlate to an engineer's or even an EM's mind to the thing that they are incentivized to care about. And so there is a gap. And so then you hire someone like me to bridge the gap. And so I go, okay, we have a gap. What are we gonna do here? We need you to care about cost. And CPU utilization just isn't doing it for you, and neither is DAO. I mean, you have a better idea of how what you do impacts DAO, sort of. All right, well, now let's ask you this granular question, right? Like, what actually moves the needle for you? What do you care about? What is relevant? Can we tie that to cost? Because now we're starting to talk about bridging a gap, right? Like, okay, can we tie that to cost? And so getting specific with the business units, and again, I'm still tackling those top 5 that Chase mentioned, right? We've got 2 of them done. We're on the 3rd. We're gonna kick into the 4th next quarter, right? But getting specific with them. And then that turns into generating ownership. Because they've told us what they want the metric to represent. They picked it. They didn't just pick it, they told us what they wanted in it. We may have put together the queries and the dashboard that show it, but we didn't make it. We made it from the components you gave us. And now, we wrap it up in a bow and we give it back to you. Because the minute that you start caring about it and that you want to improve it, and then you go, well, could we just tweak them? I don't think we're accurately reflecting our storage costs here. Maybe we should, here, I'll go fix it. Now it's yours. Hello, you licked the lollipop, and now it is yours. Also, you're now holding the lollipop, not me. And so you're accountable to that lollipop and for that lollipop. Mwahahaha. But seriously, the path, define the key drivers. And then run my playbook, friends. Discover your metric, create the feeder metrics you need. Sometimes you do have to build them before you can build the top line metric. Validate it, use it, AKA profit.
And ta-da, this is what the results were actually from both of those things we just mentioned, right? Top down and bottom up. So the top down approach got us to monthly cost per 1K logged in DAO, or otherwise user, right? And there you can see kind of what that was looking like. The bottoms up approach got us to daily cost per 1K request. Notice that difference as well. First one I was manually reporting in the rears on a monthly basis. Now with the dashboarding and actually working with engineers, we were able to get this more real time and begin tracking this on a daily basis. What that also will eventually yield insight into is being able to forecast this on a daily basis and start to notice those anomalies, right? The other key thing here is that we didn't lose the business driver, right? What we changed that to was something that engineers really understand. That's request to their service. Their service, when you load the home feed of Reddit, a request goes to it, right? So we can still track that and tie that back to business drivers. That's time on site on Reddit is driving more requests to their platform. So now we can also work better with the engineers. They understand what we're talking about. They care about requests to their platform. We can still explain this value to the business and understand what we're actually getting from it.
Step 3, profit.
So we're done, right, Erin?
Totally, we're done. I win. Oh, wait. No, of course not. FinOps is never done. Thank you. Look, it is my life on a slide. At least the part of my life that is devoted to unit economics and unit costs, because of course I'm a technical program manager who's fairly senior. I don't get to just run one thing at a time. But in this part of the world, I am pretty much constantly on the lookout for stakeholders or business areas that need this sort of love, right? And when I find them, and I develop that relationship, because of course this is relationship driven, then I can get them to start brainstorming key metric candidates. What, you know, if you just had to spitball, like, what would you care about, right? This is how we get requests. This is how we get, you know, ads impressions, right? We get them on into the process. So then we start collecting data, like, okay, well, if we were gonna measure that, we don't have any baseline right now. Remember, we're starting from 0, so there is no data. So I would rather have some crappy data than 0 data. And so like, what if we measured that? What would it look like? Let's throw that on a dashboard. Does this make sense? Iterate, lather, rinse, repeat. I am a TPM, right? Get feedback from them. Go back to the beginning for me. Start the next one, but also try and this slide is slightly out of date because we now have a couple people who have moved into these gray ones that say next steps. Yes. I'm doing my job and earning my keep. We now have ads and ML both having integrated their metrics into their processes. And ads went a quarter before ML, so they are notably more mature. I will admit that Chase told me of a conversation he had last week with ML where they pulled up their unit metric to talk about something, but they were holding it wrong. But their first instinct when approached about cost was to pull up their unit metric and try to use it. So I will still count that a win, because I can teach you how to hold it right, but it's much harder to teach you to use it. So, okay, don't hold the hammer from that end, right? It's fine. And then we're starting to, with ads now, be able to track their ongoing progress, right? Including continued refinement, because they're also cycling back on this, right? They're also considering a second unit metric over there in ads. We'll see if we go there.
All right, Erin mentioned she thought she might be done with this in a few quarters. She won't be. Notice how it's cyclical, right? So not only are you doing this at the top level, like we mentioned, but now we're getting more mature. We might need to break these down further, right? Reddit's continuing to grow. We started with only 5 business units. I don't think that's going to suit our needs soon. So you can repeat this process and go down, right? We'll go down to the next level. Maybe instead of 5, we come up with 15. And so the process continues to get better accuracy and get engineers the information that they need.
There's still just one of me. 15. Don't say that out loud. Okay, but how are we going to do that? We're going to do that through partnership and continuing to lift the visibility of the extant metrics and of the work we're doing, right? So the first thing is we want these unit costs, these tools that are available now, to be visible. Again, bad TPM if the thing you made doesn't get used, right? Good news. The giants whose shoulders I stand on already have a set of canonical dashboards that say everything there is to know about cost. And now they have unit costs on them too. So that's great. There's the one-stop shop where you can look up utilization, waste, breakdowns by cloud provider, breakdowns by major area of the business, and now major area of the business unit costs for the ones we've built and where we will put the rest of them as they come along. And then again, if the tool isn't getting used, you did it wrong. So Chase and Co. talk to our engineering leaders every month and also quarterly about cost and revenue, how we're doing to plan and so on. And so these metrics are now part of those conversations, right? So they are visible at the same level as the top-down metrics that Chase and Co. built last year. You see them all on the same slide. Here are the top-down metrics. Here's your unit cost, your bottom-up metric. They are equal partners. They take up equal space. And of course, continuing to encourage the business units to use this for internal decision-making, A/B testing, launches, and also PRDs and TDDs. That's right, I want people talking about cost as early as product definition, and especially when we start talking about technical definition, right? Once you start talking about the how we're gonna do that, you should be thinking about what the how we're gonna do that costs. So, how are we gonna do this though? I am me, I've said just me like 3 times. We have this group called Efficiency Champions. Starbucks called them Friends of FinOps, right? So if you were there, you heard that one. At Instagram, we called them Efficiency POCs. It is a hub and spoke model. We to hub, data spokes. They are people in each of those major business units who give a crap about efficiency. Some of them come preloaded that way, and I love it when people come preloaded with efficiency software as part of their personal OS, but when they don't, we have to develop it. I got lucky at Reddit. We actually, I'd say 80%. So I only had to do a little bit of nudging. I love this for me. But who are we and what do we do? The Efficiency Champions is literally a mutual support V team. Because as everyone who's sitting in this room knows, it's really great to walk into a room and actually be able to talk to people, and everyone cares about what you talk about and what you do for a living. It's been incredibly validating to wander around yesterday and today, right? Like, oh, I don't have to try and use some weird miles per gallon analogy to talk about what I do for a living. Right. Internal to your company, can I just recommend you build one of those? Whatever shape it takes. Champions, friends, POCs, get those people together and get them together to co-debug, to bounce policy off of. When I first thought about unit costs, you know who I went to as my first group of you're gonna tell me if I'm full of you know what? The Efficiency Champions. And they said, yeah, I think we could do that. I mean, it's not gonna be easy, but I think we could do it. And I think it would be worth the time and it would be valuable. And then they said, like, how deep are we talking? Are we talking like a unit cost for every single engineering team? And I was like, oh, no. They said, okay, because that sounds like crazy talk. And I was like, I was thinking for like the big five. And they were like, yeah, definitely, at least one. You need someone to bounce these ideas off of, right? And it is, as I said, it's a hub and spoke. So it's cross-functional across all of Reddit engineering. And I said this before, I am constantly onboarding people into efficiency and into unit economics, right? So I live my life in outreach mode. And I am always looking for my next victim. I mean partner. Scratch. Partner. Oh yeah. So what does this do? You take my playbook and you get your partners rolling, and you know what I've just created? I've created a handy little escalator. They get on at the bottom, step 0. Step 1, they've discovered a cost, they're partway up the escalator. Step 2, they keep going up the escalator. We now are testing it and using it, and then they get near the top, like, yeah, okay, and then they take over, and then they're mature, more mature. They have gone up in maturity, which is awesome. We are busy trying to mature Reddit around costs as a whole. This is one of the ways.
That's right. And another benefit of this is we now have a ton of data that we get to go and play with, which means that there's some refinement that is going to need to occur, right? One of the first things we want to do is public investment repository. So for each of these domains, we're now tracking their unit cost. We know when their launches are happening, right? We can actually create a whole repository for them to be able to pull from to know, hey, I spent this much money, I got this return before. And now you can measure your new investments that you're launching against this historical information to know if what you're planning to do is actually a good investment based on history. What comes from that is going to be the minimum viable return. So once we start to collect this information and we have enough history of it, these business leaders can decide, okay, what's the minimum threshold these investments need to be meeting in order to keep launching efficiently, right? And using our cost in an effective way. So with your business units, you can come up with that MVR. We alluded to this earlier, but some of these metrics aren't holding like we might want them to, right? Or there might be other metrics that should be pulled in alongside of these. So the journey is not just done. We'll continue doing additional unit metric exploration, deciding if we should maybe switch metrics with these business units, deciding if maybe we should be using 2 and do some combination of them, right? If that's not too complex. But business units are complex. So we want to make sure that what we're showing them and what they're seeing is still accurate and a good representation of their business. And as finance, what we can also do with this is bring it back and maybe start to look at multivariable demand driver forecasting. So if their investments aren't appropriately changing that unit cost that we have for them, then how are we going to be able to do unit cost forecasting with that metric that we're now tracking, right? So again, we might have to bring in multiple metrics into our forecasting models in order to most accurately predict what we're going to spend in the future. So all that to say, still a lot of work to be done. FinOps is never done. All right, and all this summarized, Kevin Mueller had a great quote. So we are using unit economics for maximizing profit. It is less about how much we are spending. As we mentioned in the beginning, our cost per user, we're not necessarily expecting that to go down, but rather grow at a slower rate than our revenue per user. So it is less about how much we are spending in the cloud and more about how much we are profiting from it.
My favorite words to throw around: sublinear growth. People go, ooh, that sounds fancy. And I'm like, yeah, it means we have a margin. You can find us here. I want to make one pitch, which is you should join the subreddit, RedditEng, where we talk about all the cool stuff we build.
We post every Monday for everything we're doing in the engineering world at Reddit.
And also, we are hiring.
I think that QR code goes to the career
Yes,
page.
I
Someone
think
check that.
Yeah, so we're pretty sure that goes to our career page, but feel free to come approach us, talk to us about the fact that we're hiring. We are hiring. I know, in this day and age, in this economy, we're hiring. All right. Questions?
Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience?
You guys mentioned normalization of units across business units, and I would love to hear more examples of that, because I haven't seen that be too successful in a lot of places. So any examples come to mind for normalized business units across businesses?
I guess, how have you seen it be bad? I'm curious.
Well, not bad, but trying to tie impressions to, I mean, someone at one point wanted to actually charge for the operational support that they were providing for tenants of their platform.
Okay.
And those don't mix very well.
All right, yeah, happy to talk more about that. So when we're saying normalization, we're just meaning create that unit metric such that it's similar between the business units. So whatever you're dividing by, right? Like where all of our business units, we're typically speaking in dollars per whatever it is. So this also reduces fluctuation in or variability, right, in their cost as well. As we mentioned, if we were just dividing by impressions, we're talking pennies, maybe fractions of a penny, and that could vary a lot every day where you're seeing huge percent growth, right? So that's what we mean, normalize it. So just decide what number your business units resonate with, or roughly what's the range, right? Like we were finding $3 to $10, like between that, that's pretty good, reduces variability, and we're all talking about real money, right? I could hold $3, that's a little bit more impactful than pennies.
Cool. Trish.
Oops. Hi. Great presentation. Thank you very much. So I have a question about the scope of your work over here. Was your work concerned mostly just with cloud costs, or were you considering at any point of time the manual work, the manual processes that need to go into creating your deliverables?
That's a great question. So right now our scope of work has just been focused kind of on the cloud portion. Internally though, when we do think about investments, a lot of the time we do bring into factor, right, actual human cost into that overall investment. I would think of them kind of right now, for us, they're almost independent though, right? Two different things on how we think about headcount versus cost, but definitely something to consider in the future to get an overall impact of the investment.
Thank you.
More questions? Yes, over there. Go quickly. Yeah, but I come through.
How do you handle shared costs?
Ah, how do we handle shared costs? A wonderful and very, very valid question. When I said we do approximations, yep, we're doing approximations. And we absolutely have a unit cost, the ML unit cost, I will be that specific, has where we realize that of this particular shared service, after looking at a ton of data historically, they use about 30% of it. So right now there is a asterisk on the notations for this unit cost. There is a hard-coded 30% of that particular shared service's total costs factored in. And we know that, and they know that, and they know that that needs to be audited periodically. And so that's a thing. I mean, in that final step of monitoring and keeping track, probably semi-annual audits of what your unit cost math actually is, and is that accurate still, is going to be part of what we need to keep people doing, right? I don't want them to do it every month. I don't want them to do it every quarter. I think that would be way too much overhead. But I think twice a year you could step back and go, does this math still math? are all of the various factors in this sum or division, because that's pretty much what it is sums and divisions, right? It's not complicated, it's arithmetic, but it could be a very big piece of arithmetic. Like, do each of these pieces of the math actually still make sense? And are they still pointing at the right thing and accurate? Because if they don't, or aren't, or have not become less accurate over time, or you did a bunch of efficiency work and you only used 25% of that shared resource now, which was a huge win, but oh, your unit cost still reflects 30 because that's hard coded in, because we were willing to take a crappy approximation over not having a unit cost. We're also working on building from a capacity perspective the ability to actually know more real time about this, and then that gets replaced as that factor in the math, right? But this is one of those building the plane while it flies games. So yeah, not gonna lie, crappy approximation, better than nothing.
Yeah, I would also say that factors in a little bit more when we think about breaking down the domains. Like we mentioned, we just kind of did our 5 large buckets, which account for a lot of our spend, but those are rather large, right? Our ML organization's a lot of people. It's a lot of different teams. So yeah, approximation at this time until we get the further insights.
I'd like to understand, do you did any statistical analysis to understand if the metrics chosen by the teams actually correlate to their costs, or you just implying that if it's something that they are being demanded on by the business, it's good enough?
We haven't actually had a problem with people trying to game this process yet. However, I work with a lot of really smart people, and I would not be surprised if at some point in time somebody does. Also, Reddit inside does look a little bit like the Reddit that you guys all know outside, which is to say things like shitposting are real, and someone at some point is going to try and pull our leg. But we do actually, I mean, that's why we have the top-down costs, right? We aren't replacing the top-down costs with these bottom-up costs. They live together as equal citizens in the same pool of metrics, because if the top-down cost is doing something completely wackadoo, like growing 30% week over week, and the unit cost is doing nothing, that smells funny. So we will absolutely dig into that. Again, we haven't really had that. Even the 2 examples that we gave you with the ML cost, you notice that even though Chase's line, which was monthly, so it was much less like granular, the general shape of those 2 lines matched, right? So you were like, okay, you can see how that would have been a monthly line against a daily line, right? And we did that, right? So we are keeping an eye. We aren't just trusting. But also, I've actually been surprised that I haven't gotten too much bad behavior there.
Yeah, I'll also say that I think that's where it comes into play, where you have additional metrics as well. So not just one to rule them all, right? But like our ads domain, they did some launches that didn't impact impressions directly. So their cost per impression went up. Well, they're telling us it's because it did these other things. So that's where that actually comes from. We need to go get that visibility then to ensure they're not gaming that system, right? And we're able to follow along appropriately.
Oh, yeah. There we go. I have another question. How do you determine if you have enough or too many metrics to track or follow?
My spidey senses.
Ah, that's what I thought.
Oh, so like Chase said, we have 5 big pillars right now, right? We call them finance domains, but you know, whatever. Call them George. They are a group of 5 things that we care about. So I want 5 to start, but I'm aware that 5 isn't gonna be enough. Ads is already talking about click-through rate, which is the thing that those launches impacted that didn't impact impressions. So all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe we need to check this, you know, look at this other thing. And as long as I don't have nuclear proliferation of metrics, I'll be cool. But the minute we can't hold them in a dashboard that, you know, in a collection of dashboards that makes sense, and the minute we can't keep them in our heads, I think we've gotten out of hand. So I was actually saying that I didn't want to see any more than about 5 per major domain, right? None of our major domains at this point break down into 5 major sum components. Most are the biggest ones at 4, and the others are at, you know, 3. So, and all of that said, my second half of this year is going to be devoted to determining the unit cost of our infrastructure. And I did just say my second half, and yes, the entire rest of this conversation I've been saying per quarter, because me and the SMEs got together and talked about what it would take to make an infra unit cost, and we all went, I don't think we can do that in a quarter. In fact, they did that to me and I was like, oh God, I'm not mad at you, you guys. Like, don't like get all bashful and be like, I don't think we can do that in a quarter, Erin. Like, okay, then let's not do it in a quarter. How's a half feel? Like, yeah, I think we could do it in a half. Okay, let's do it in a half. I am a TPM, I'm not unreasonable. And we're gonna get thrown off the stage any minute now.
All right, that was it. Give a massive round of applause for Erin and Chase from Reddit.
Thank you all.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. For more FinOps X 2025 content, go check out our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and leave comments and questions for all of our wonderful speakers. We appreciate your support.